Good evening and welcome. Thank you for joining us for our public forum this evening. We appreciate you spending the next hour to 90 minutes with us as we present the 90% design for Resilient Bridgeport's two projects, Rebuild by Design, RBD, and National Disaster Resiliency, NDR, also referred to as the Flood Risk Reduction Project, FRRP. It is important to note that we are presenting 90% design tonight, meaning we are very close to final design. Of course, we will take questions and comments this evening, but we are beyond the aspect of the project where we are considering modifications to the design. We are well beyond that phase. You should recall we conducted public forums during the earlier phases and through the 30 to 60% design. You can review the notes from those meetings on the Resilient Bridgeport website. All of your comments are memorialized there. So as members of the Bridgeport community, I trust that you are familiar with this federally funded project or you wouldn't be here this evening. And we have met with you throughout the years as a Resilient Bridgeport team prior to today. As I mentioned previously during the 60% design presentation, the Department of Housing partnered with the Department of Transportation to assist with the planning and construction of these projects and the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection for the flood control infrastructure ownership and maintenance and other aspects of the project. We continue to work with WSP, our primary design consultant, and Wagner and Ball, who are consultants for urban and environmental architecture. Before I introduce the members of our team who will serve as members of the panel that will answer your questions later this evening, I want to thank HUD, who is our primary source of funding, National Fish and Wildlife, as well as FEMA. And I also want to thank Congressman Himes and the members of the federal delegation for supporting this project. Next slide. So this meeting is being recorded. We are using closed captioning as well during the presentation. And during the presentation, attendees are muted. However, at the conclusion of the presentation, you are able to ask questions. And you are able to ask questions either by typing them into the chat, or you can signal us by clicking the question icon and raising your hand rather, and we will unmute you. So you can ask your questions aloud. So you can do it either way. We can unmute you, you ask your questions, everyone hears, or you can type it in the chat, whichever is comfortable for you. Finally, if you have follow-up questions after the presentation, you will certainly have the opportunity to submit those questions to us. So you'll have more than one bite at the apple. So tonight's agenda, of course, we will go over the project, the terms that you'll get familiar with, and acronyms that we use. We'll have a program overview. You'll meet the team, and we'll give you the design update for 90% design for both Rebuild by Design and NDR, which is also FRRP, the Flood Risk Reduction Project. And finally, we will answer any questions you may have. Next slide. So let's start with the glossary of terms. Resilient Bridgeport. That is both of the projects together combined. We have two projects. We have the RBD project, which is on the western side of Park Avenue, which is where the former, over where Iranison Avenue is in the former marina projects. And now Windward Development is there. And let's see, we have Head of Park, the area of Seaside Park, bounded by University Avenue, Broad Street, Main Street, and the shorefront. And that's on the NDR side of the project, which is the eastern side of Park Avenue. The Resilience Gateway proposed entrance to Seaside Park from the terminated end of Main Street at the northern intersection of Main Street and University Avenue. Next slide. And here's our many, many acronyms. You may be familiar with most, but we just wanted to give you an opportunity to review a few. So as we continue to discuss the project, you can familiarize yourself with them. So we'll give you a couple of seconds to review. Okay, next slide, please. Next slide. Alrighty, so the members of the Resilient Bridgeport team consist of the Connecticut Department of Housing. I'm sorry if I was remiss. I'm Shantae Hanks, the Deputy Commissioner for the Department of Housing. We also have with us Hermia Dallaire. She is the program manager for the Sandy program, as well as basically my left and right hand in this project. And we also have Jeff Ozilski. He's also our admin support for this project. We have the Connecticut Department of Transportation, and they are also handling not only the design and planning with us as far as construction, as well as right-of-way. With us tonight, we have Brett Stark. I believe Dom Seltruda is with us, and Andy Fessemeyer. We also have the Connecticut Department of Energy Environmental Protection. There are members of our team. I don't see, oh yes, I do, I'm sorry. Chuck Lee is with us here tonight, representing DEEP. Thanks, Chuck. And we also have WSP. The WSP, as I've aforementioned, is our lead design team. And we also have our subs with us here this evening. We have Wagner and Ball, and if I missed anyone, I do apologize, but we will mention them throughout the evening. I believe we have Reed Hildebrand with us in Arcadis. Next slide. Program overview. In case you are fairly new or just to go through quickly, this project is to improve conditions in Bridgeport South End neighborhood. General components, it's flood barriers, pump station, elevated roadways, and stormwater channel. And it is federally funded, this program. This project is completely funded by a combination of HUD, which is our primary funding source, as well as FEMA and National Fish and Wildlife. Next slide. And it's also important to note that this is an environmental justice project. So we're extremely proud as the state of Connecticut, Department of Housing, Department of Transportation, and DEEP to be able to bring this project to the south end of Bridgeport, and actually 2 projects. And it's important to note that these projects were competitive grants that were awarded to the state of Connecticut for the south end of Bridgeport. Next slide. This is the current program status. Next slide. And now we will start our design update. And without further ado, I will turn over the virtual baton to Rich Pettinelli of WSP. Take it away, Rich.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner. Good evening, everybody. So we will start with the RBD project. If I get the next slide. Next one. So just to familiarize and remind everybody what we're talking about with the RBD project. This is the former site of Seaside Village. It has been raised at this point in time and is currently an open field. Our work on this project will be extending Johnson Street. So we will extend Johnson Street from Columbia to Aranistan. And we will build a stormwater park, which will double as both a public gathering spot and a rainwater infrastructure facility when the need arises. Along with these 2 components, we will build a pump station on the intersection of South Avenue and Aranistan, and a force main that will discharge into an existing outfall in Cedar Creek. Next slide. So these are the major components I have just gone through. As the Deputy Commissioner mentioned, we are in final design. We have submitted our 90% and are awaiting comments from the reviewing agencies. And we continue to coordinate closely with the City of Bridgeport, WPCA with the pump station, and Bridgeport Housing Authority and JHM, who's doing the new development there. Next. So the intent here is to improve stormwater management with a resilient design that blends into an urban environment. So we'll gather about 20 acres of area that can be discharged and handled by our stormwater system. We will tap into the existing drainage structures, mainly to the east of the park and to the north. And we will route that through a series of detention basins in the pond, and then discharge through a gravity system to the pump station and then force main to the existing outfall again at Cedar Creek. Next. So this is a slide that depicts the engineering aspects of this project. Shown in yellow here is a new Johnson Street extension. It's about 860 feet. And it runs again from Aranistan to Columbia Street. We are elevating this roadway to provide dry egress to the area. So it will be at elevation 14 as it approaches its eastern end. Obviously, we're meeting the grade at Aranistan. When we come to Columbia, we're about 2 feet higher than current grade, again, maintaining that flood elevation. So there will be some reconstruction of the Columbia Street and Johnson Street intersection, which runs north and south as we go back to existing grade on Columbia. And similarly, as we extend further eastward on Johnson Street, we need to run that until we get to elevation 14. So it's a couple hundred feet of redesign or elevated roadway along the existing Johnson Street. Again, the maximum elevation change that we're looking at over existing roads is just in the neighborhood of 2 feet. This shows a profile of the proposed road. So you can see we do get up to 14 and we tie in to Johnson Street where it is 14. No proposed changes to Aranistan. We're not changing the profile there. We're going to meet that. Next. So the RBD project is a little bit on the unique side. The vast majority of the work is done off-road. It's a currently open field. We don't anticipate any significant impacts to local traffic while we're constructing the extension. The feed to the pump station will be off of Aranistan. It'll be running in the shoulder or actually to the east of the current sidewalk. So that won't impact traffic in the area. So the majority of this job is just working in a field and it won't impact your daily commute or travel in the area. When we get to the intersection of Columbia and the work on Johnson Street, that does require that we shut that down and elevate that roadway. We anticipate that work being about a month. It's not, again, a large lift, but we do anticipate about a month's worth of work. So at that point, we will institute a detour shown here, which gets people around this intersection. Johnson Street from the edge or the existing Johnson Street, I should say, will be temporarily converted to a two-way street. Currently, it's one-way to allow access to the residents on Johnson Street. And then once this is done, obviously this detour comes down and we open up the new road system. Again, we anticipate this taking about a month. Next. So when we last met, we were looking at the stormwater park and we were evaluating a couple options for the stormwater park. We were looking at either a grass field, play area, or we were also evaluating the potential of doing a wet marsh, basically bringing in and excavating it deep enough to get enough water into it so that we had basically a constructed wetland. Based upon feedback that we got, a little bit further evaluation, that option has not been continued. We are going to go with a park atmosphere here. So we're going to have a grassed playing area with a path going through the center of it. And I should have mentioned when we looked at the overall slide on this, there is a path here that you could see in the center of this park that is designed and set so that it will get wet relatively quickly. And less than a 10-year storm, that path will go underwater, making it a not inviting path. The idea is not to create an area that people are in while this is functioning as a stormwater infrastructure facility. Maximum water depth that we're going to have in a design storm of 25 years is about 2 feet, and that is all the way at the western end of the park. And these ponds are designed to drain out within 24 hours. There are weirs set between the various basins, which are really low spots that the water will move back and forth between the basins as it progresses through the stormwater park. And then each basin is connected to its subsequent basin via a low flow pipe. So if the water is not up to the elevation of the weir, it'll eventually drain through that pipe and out of the system entirely, leaving, again, a grass field when we're done. So this is a view from Columbia towards Aranistan. It's obviously in a dry condition. There'll be a small head wall over on that side of the pond. That is the inlet chamber. Most of the drainage pipes that we are collecting the water from are coming in at this location. And again, it'll fill up this first sedimentation basin, overflow the sidewalk, and start filling up the subsequent basins. There are 3 total basins after the sedimentation basin. We'll have a nice park feature to the sides, so you'll have a nice sidewalk, sitting areas, and such. This is a view towards Aranistan. Again, in normal condition, this is a nice grass field. It will be sloped on the sides, but a nice area to relax and enjoy the outdoors. You can see here in this, whoops, you jumped on me. Yeah, thank you. This is looking towards Aranistan. There's a bus there that you could see the top of the bus. And you can see a small retaining wall. That is the outlet structure, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, now. So here we're looking from the opposite direction. This is looking towards Columbia, where the pedestrian path is coming in and meeting up, and then progressing through the sedimentation, or the park area. Again, this path is set so that it will get wet relatively quickly. We don't want people walking through the pond while it's functioning as a stormwater management system. Next. I should back up 1 second with the pond. It will be signed. So obviously this does serve a dual purpose of stormwater and public gathering spot. There will be signs and warnings that when it is functioning as stormwater detention facility, it's not a place you should be recreating, and there'll be signs warning that it is subject to inundation and water, and care needs to be taken. So the second phase, or the second aspect of the project, is the pump station. So the pump station is located again at the corner of South Street and Aranistan. It is a submersible pump station, so the pumps are actually going to be in a wet well and in the stormwater. The building that you see houses the mechanics of the pump station. So that's the electrical controls and the standby generator. In front of it, we are planning a public plaza. So a nice gathering area, maintaining a bus stop and such in the area. But again, a nice gathering area with an overhang architectural feature of the pump station. Benches and the like are planned for the area. There's no access to the pump station from the public side. All access will be via gates into the pump yard. So the building is secure. Next. This is just a slide showing the lighting effect that is planned for it in the evening. So adding some architectural interest to the area. This view depicts it looking up Aranistan to the north. Again, this depicts the public gathering area, a ramp up to a higher area so you can see out. And again, there's a security fence surrounding basically the guts of the pump station. This shows the yard from an elevated position looking north. That is South Street to the top of the page. So here you can see the building pump station over on the right hand side. Those are louvers to feed air to the pump station, or I'm sorry, to the generator when it runs. So this is housed with an emergency generator. all controls and the generator are going to be installed above the flood level of 14. So this pump station will function during a flood event, and the equipment will stay dry. The pumps are in this concrete box that you see to the lower left of the pump station. You see a number of basically Bilco hatches. Those are to access the pumps and the valves that are associated with the pumps. Water will flow into this pump station. There are 3 submersible pumps here. This pump station is designed for 35 cubic feet per second, which is a moderate sized pump station, and that will run with 2 pumps on that. So there's always one on standby. The pumps sit in the water. They evacuate the stormwater from the surrounding area through a series of pipes that are connected up through these valves and then out down into South Street and to the discharge point. The generator is an emergency operations generator. It is intended to run only when power is out, so we don't flood the area and we can keep up with the stormwater. You will also experience this being exercised once a month or so for about a half an hour. The generator is inside the building. There is a masonry wall surrounding that area, so exhaust and noise will be directed upward. So it is it is a generator, it will run, but we have done it's muffled and we've deflected sound and exhaust from it. Next. So schedule for RBD, as I've stated, we submitted the 90% design in January. We are anticipating getting our comments back shortly and proceeding with the 100%. Permit applications are underway. The permits in this case are mainly general. We're not doing an awful lot of work in any regulated areas or anything. We anticipate completing our design early summer. Permits should be issued by the fall of this year, and construction will start shortly thereafter, winter, and we are looking to complete construction by the fall of 2023. Moving on to the flood risk reduction project. So this is the FRRP project. This is the one down near Goodwin College now, University of Bridgeport. So this slide depicts the extent of the work that we're doing and what we're doing here. So there are a couple interesting colors here. The coastal flood defense system, or the flood wall, is shown in blue and purple. So we talk about 2 components of this system. We talk about the east-west, which is the blue portion running east and west, and the north-south, we're really original with our names, and north-south is shown in purple. So we use a couple different technologies to accomplish or to construct the coastal flood defense system. The first is an eye wall. That is a steel sheet pile, the Z piles that you see along the shore. That is that pile is driven into the ground to about a depth of 40 feet, acts as a curtain. The water can't get through it. This blue section is that eye wall. We are going to bury the eye wall in a berm. So we're going to put dirt up alongside of it. So you won't see it per se through the majority of its run. From Broad Street to the west, we are going to leave it as a berm, and the proposed school will come in and do their landscaping on top of it. So there'll be a plaza on top. So essentially, except for any signage we put telling people what's there, you won't know it is here. As we come to the area that we call Hedda Park, University between Broad and Main Street, that also is elevated. This area is the highest elevation that we need, and that will be up to elevation 17-ish. The flood control is at 16. So that represents about 11 feet of additional fill on top of the current elevation. We are going to do some renovations to the park. We're building a public plaza where that current horseshoe now exists with the road, or semicircle. The semicircle will be closed, and we will build a plaza up above with a nice view shed that we'll talk about in a little bit down over the waters. As we progress across the development parcel at 60 Main, it still is this eye wall concept. Here we're a little bit different because this area is exposed to more wave action than the University Avenue section. So this area is armored. And then we switch over to a concrete T-wall, and I have pictures of what these look like in the next couple slides. So this has a much smaller footprint, and we are able to use a concrete T-wall to snake up through the industrial area, and eventually we tie back in to high elevations up at the rail yard. We went, next slide. Oh, no, stay here. Sorry, can you back up? So the yellow shown here is the road work that's required. We are going to, so again, as I mentioned, this in the Hedda Park area, which is highest, we're 10 to 11 feet above existing grade. To maintain access to the areas south of the coastal flood defense system, we are going to elevate Broad Street. We're going to build it up at a 5% slope, which meets both ADA and the Bridgeport Fire Department's requirements. We will crest at the top of the coastal flood defense system and then come back down at a 5% slope. We also are elevating University Avenue. So University west of Broad Street is going to be closed to traffic as part of the high school's construction. Between Broad and Main, we're going to elevate it. It's two-way traffic in this section. And then we are going to elevate Main Street South, we call it, and ramp that back down to existing grade, much like we did with Broad Street. We looked at doing that at Main Street North. However, these three structures here make that ramp impractical. So we are terminating traffic heading through University. We'll build a resiliency center here with a nice pocket park. Shown in red here is this project also has a pump station. This is a much larger pump station. It's 125 cubic feet per second, so roughly 3 times the size of RBD's. That pump station is built on Henry Street. Force Main will connect it to the area at between Broad and Main. That area, again, we call the Belvedere, will have a cistern that will discharge the water via a nice weir that you'll see some nice hydraulic action in while it's functioning. And that will flow through a channel being constructed in Seaside Park. A new culvert is planned for Main Street at the south end of the park section, and then that'll discharge into a stilling basin and over a level spreader to discharge into the waters of Long Island Sound. We went with the eye wall through this section because it allows more flexibility. It does two things. It allows flexibility and allows us to basically hide it and mask it. The eye wall, the steel sheet piling, is in fact the coastal flood defense system. So with the berm, that really is just a masking element. With this technology and this combination that we built, you can put a building, you can put trees, you can do things within 15 feet of the eye wall of the steel sheet piling. If we were to build a pure berm or a dike like you see along the Mississippi, in that case, the entire earthen structure is part of the flood control and really becomes a sacrosanct area that you cannot build on, you cannot put trees on. It is a very large swath of really grass running through the city, and we didn't think that was the proper choice. Too much restrictions with it. So this is really, again, we just need an area that you can't put a foundation or a large tree within. You actually could span a building over the coastal flood defense system as long as you stay outside 15 feet with your foundations. So that allows a lot of flexibility here. And again, we're able to hide it. Once we come to the north-south alignment, the idea of putting in an earthen berm is just not feasible with the existing. Yeah, actually, it's a good point. Sorry, Deputy Commissioner. We can move on. We can talk about the cross sections. So this slide, go on off this one. Next slide. So this goes over what we just did, what I just talked about. It summarizes it in terms of what we've done via the roads. Next slide. So this is, it would have been helpful. I got a little carried away. I apologize. This would have been helpful. So this is University Avenue. So again, we have the steel sheet piling and an earthen berm. And again, as I mentioned, you can get within 15 feet of this piling here and allow construction. And when we're done, you won't see that this is a wall. Next. When we get to 60 Main Street, as I mentioned, there's more wave action to 60 Main Street. So we're proposing to use an articulated concrete block mat. So this kind of is like bathroom tile, but it's a 1x1 or so concrete block that's tied together with steel wire. This provides protection and is can be removed if work is done on top of this. So if a developer brings in fill and you know, puts something over this bank, we don't need this block anymore. The block is really a temporary protection measure while it is purely the berm and eye wall. Next. So when we get to the north-south alignment, we have a concrete T-wall. This is at grade, and this structure here is the flood control. What you see is a base, and then the vertical section is a stem. Underneath it are steel H piles. That's the foundation. So these are the I-beams that you see in any steel construction, driven vertically down to bedrock, and that is what this will sit on and handle the floods with. In the middle of that is a cutoff wall, and that is about 15 feet deep, and it's the same steel sheet piling that the eye wall is constructed out of. This cutoff wall can be interrupted if we're crossing over large utilities or an obstruction. We can interrupt that flood wall or that seepage wall. It is not a critical component. We just have to account for extra seepage when we design the pump station. So this, you know, we're building this flood wall and the system that during flood events we will shut down tight, but during normal events we don't want to do that. We want to allow this to function and allow people back and forth as they do now. So we're going to install a series of gates. There are 9 gates. For the vast majority of the time, these gates are open. You don't know that that area can be closed off. We're using a combination of 2 types of gates for this project. We're using roller gates and plank gates. So next slide. So this is an example of a roller gate, and we're using these at Atlantic and Ferry Access Road. So to this, the steel gate is always present. It is usually retracted to a pocket area to the left or right of the passageway. This is activated. In this case, we're going to activate this via a pulley system, a winch system that could be tied up to a pickup, and you drive the pickup forward, close the gate. The gate rolls on rollers that drop into pockets when you are actually closing the gate. The steel gate obviously then just sits on a grade beam or a concrete structure that's put into the road. Maintenance on this is maintaining the wheels properly greased and the track cleaned so that it functions when you need it. This is relatively quick to close. and easy to do so with a small crew. They are more expensive, and again, you always have this large steel structure somewhere nearby, actually immediately adjacent. There are concrete structures, pillars that will be permanent, and that's what the door or the gate slides into, and that's your seal in your pocket. Next slide. The second is a slot gate. So here, these are planks that are brought out. So again, we have a concrete grade beam in the road or in the gap that we're looking to close up. Depending on the width, there are a number of I-beams that are put in. So again, these are an I-beam just like you see during normal construction or under a bridge. They are bolted into the roadway through sockets that are permanently there. So these are then put in. You have vertical members then here, and the number again depends on the width that we're spanning. And then these are aluminum planks that are just dropped in, weir boards per se, and they sit tight against each other. And you put the number in. You know, the more you put in, the higher your gate is. These are all calculated out as to how many we need at each location. These are a little more intensive to install. The advantages are they're not always here. There are concrete receptacles again at either end, concrete pillars to receive the terminal ends, but they're not always present. They're stored nearby. They are a little more, there's more manual labor involved in putting this in. You usually need a small skid mounted track or something that can drop these in place. Although if it's short enough, a crew of men can do it. And then when the flood is passed, you basically just reverse the operation, lifting the planks off and then removing the steel I-beams, and traffic can resume. These are proposed again for Broad Street and the private properties. And they're a little less expensive than the roller gates. The last major component is the culvert I had talked about. So the culvert goes across Main Street at the south end of the area we call Hedda Park. So the south end of Seaside Park. It is a 7x3 box culvert, pretty standard. It handles the design flow of 125 CFS. The capacity of this is over 130 CFS. So the park will not be flooded excessively. We'll move whatever water we put in, but and then it discharges to a stilling basin, and this will run across the top of the bank that's presently there, and then a concrete level spreader is there. Next question. Or next slide. Yeah. So this is a picture of the culvert. And this is what we're talking about when we talk about a level spreader. We want to maintain this as a permanent level feature. If they settle, they no longer are level spreader, they become point discharges and they lead to erosion. So it's not a very complicated structure. This basically is a precast concrete curb, and it is set in a bed of mortar that is set on a base material, and that leaves a stable condition that isn't subject to frost heaves or anything else. So this is pretty permanent. You can mask it all the way up and down on the sides so that you don't see this. And again, it's a nice level spread. This spreads the water out so that you have a very gentle flow over it, even during the design storm. And this is calculated out to result in velocities that are less than erosive speeds, 2.5, 3 feet per second, that would move the sand. So it'll be a very gentle discharge into the waters of Long Island Sound. This was actually requested and suggested by the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, and we're happy to put it in. The stilling base behind it will be planted with proper shoreline species, so maintaining the green environment that's there now. Next. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Louise, and she's going to talk about the Seaside Park renovations.
Great. Thank you, Rich. My name is Louise Lewis. I am a senior associate with Reed Hildebrand in the New Haven office. And our design work at the head of park has really been about how to reconcile Olmsted's vision for the park with the flooding conditions and safety realities of today. And that these are the realities that are highlighted in these bullet points on this slide. If you could go to the next slide. So to this end, the landscape design for head of park is really utilizing green infrastructure, stormwater management, and necessary topographic change to create flexible outdoor spaces for people to interact with one another, with the coastal environment, to gather, to experience incredible views of the sound. So in this illustrative plan, the design is still, you can see the design is still structured by 3 primary moves. The planted channel that's running north-south that Rich was speaking to, that captures and conveys water during a storm event. The filtered buffer of trees and shrubs along the east-west edges of the park. And then the topographic moves, the 10 to 11 feet of grade change that Rich mentioned earlier, that's the raising of the grade to above flood elevation that create and give definition to these outdoor spaces that I was referring to, areas for gathering, activity, like the center lawn that you can see in the middle, kind of up towards the top of the screen, and also the prospect and overlook. And this framework or strategy hasn't changed from the 60% design. Next slide. So while the framework is still the same, there have been a few adjustments to the design that have primarily derived from budgetary constraints, but also from the recently completed tree inventory that was compiled by the arborist trefoil that I'll talk about in a few slides. So changes on this slide show the difference between the 60% milestone and now we're at the 90% milestone. And they really refer to some grading adjustments and some subtle shifts in the path alignment from the edges of the park to the park interior, which is similar to how the circulation paths operate now or work now. And then there's a shift from the gathering spaces that are shown kind of at the north on the plan on the left in the 60% set and where we are now, where those gathering spaces are closer to the water. Go to the next slide. This is a diagram that I think many of you have seen before that talks about stormwater and some of the aspects that Rich mentioned earlier and what the capacity of the channel is during these different storm events and how that change in grade also can accommodate these storms. And if you could go to the next slide. So this is the tree inventory that I mentioned a couple slides back. This is inventory that was completed by the arborist trefoil, and it was done for the entirety of Seaside Park. We're focusing on the head of park area on the plan on the right. Trefoil went out to the site, they tagged, categorized, assessed, and provided recommendations for all existing trees in Seaside Park. And there's a substantial report that goes along with it. These are the sort of takeaways that we've gleaned from the report as it relates to the head of park. And I'll kind of go through them quickly. One is about trying to save and protect existing trees that are deemed to be in good condition, where possible and where the grading constraints allow. The next bullet is really about selecting coastal species, so trees that will do well in this environment, and also about selecting a diversity of tree species and also diversity of tree sizes. And this is really about long-term maintenance and sustainability. And then incorporating tree protection and first-year care into the design. This is really helping to ensure that what is planted survives. And similarly with the pest management and pruning regimens, this is also about protecting and preserving this investment in trees. And then we have some images below of the variety of species that we're looking at for the park. And The next couple slides are really just giving a glimpse at how the park might look and feel. This first rendering is of the Belvedere to the north, the water inlet, stilling basin, and overflow weir that Rich mentioned earlier, the flexible lawn space in the center, and the planted channel and swale that is running north-south through the park. And then the site amenities that really weave between these spaces, the circulation paths, the lighting, the benches. There's a boardwalk and a bridge as well. Into the next slide. And then looking towards the Sound to the south, the overlook and Prospect, you can see the change in grade and elevation. You can also see the bridge crossing further on, and really looking at how those amenities weave together. And with that, I will return to Rich.
Okay, thank you. So as I mentioned, we are going to put a pocket park at the northern side of the intersection of University and Main Street. This is a rendition of that, the Resiliency Gateway. So it'll be a nice, again, a nice public gathering space. And this will serve as like the ceremonial entrance to the park for pedestrians and bicyclists. That wouldn't be possible if we kept the vehicular access through here. So we'll have a ramp section going up through here. This is ADA compliant. It will be a zigzag up and allow for pedestrians and bikes to come up. Gathering spaces, new plantings, stormwater management system in here for some green infrastructure. And again, the decorative lighting theme that we're going to be using in the area. Next slide. So pump station. So the last component is the pump station. So we are locating a pump station on Henry Street. This again is a submersible pump station, much like the RBD pump station. This pump station is sized for a 100-year storm event. And we are also designing it to help alleviate what we call the nuisance floods. So the storm drainage system in the area works pretty well, but it doesn't work 5 or 6 times a year during heavy rain events when you guys get floods in the neighborhood. We have a very large pump station we need to construct for the coastal flood defense system. When that is shut, all the water falling behind it needs to get evacuated, and all the water that might come over with some wave action also needs to get evacuated. It seems a good opportunity to use that infrastructure we have to build to help with these nuisance floods. The pump station will be connected to the existing storm drainage system as it leaves the area in a large pipe in Henry Street. Our intent is that for normal events, this pump station will not come on. But for a more significant event, or when it starts to back up the storm drainage system and a flood is approaching, even a small flood, we are going to be taking some of that water off of the system. We'll be siphoning it through a weir, bringing it into the pump station and evacuating it down through the park in the manner we just described. There is a limited zone that this will impact, but we do a good job at evacuating the floods in the vicinity of the pump station and up South Street or up Main Street and Broad Street. And then we reduce it as it goes further out. But we are going to help with nuisance floods. And again, it's a good use of this facility we're building. The pump station will be designed to include educational opportunities. We'll talk about that with some of the renderings that we have. And as we've described, this discharges through a series of 2 force mains and into the open channel running down Seaside Park. Next slide. So this kind of demonstrates what we're talking about with this blue line that you see here. The pump station's over on the right-hand side. That is on Henry Street there. There'll be we're going to install a diversion chamber cut into the existing pipe and put a diversion chamber in Henry Street. Again, once the water in that pipe builds up to a certain level, it'll discharge towards the pump station and continue to discharge towards its normal outfall, but excessive water will discharge into the pump station and then we'll pump it out. It goes through a force main that runs from the pump station building there to the park, and then down through that channel that Louise described and out over the level spreader and into Long Island Sound. These are some views of the pump station. Again, a submersible pump station. This one allows, we do have a viewport here. The generator is housed outside of this one. Both of these are, again, the controls and the generator are located above floodplain. So should something go wrong with the coastal flood defense system, the pump station can work. So again, just some views of the pump station and the approach to it. On the left-hand side here is a southeast view of the pump station. If you look in the middle of the pump station, that's a viewing window. So there was discussion and there was consideration of the educational opportunities of allowing school children and the public into the pump station upon occasion. When we got done with really evaluating what the pump station is going to do and how we're going to build it, it turns out that the interior of this pump station is really going to be a bunch of closed electrical boxes you really don't want to open because they're quite dangerous. But the actual action going on in the pump station is in the wet well. Again, these are submersible pumps. So we installed a window in the wet well that will allow you to see the pumps, understand what's going on, and see them in action. Again, most of the action is inside the pump, but you will see their impact on the water and drawing down the stormwater. We're planning on putting a pedestrian path connecting Main Street to the pump station, and we're looking at the possibility of doing some interesting urban design features. This pipe that you see here in the lower right is a 36-inch pipe. That's the size of the force main, cut open and made into a bench. And then we're exploring the possibility of getting some old pumps and cutting them open so that people can see what is actually inside the pumps that are in the building and understand a little better what this facility does. Just some additional views from the development parcel and a view of the night, what it looks like at night. So constructing the FRREP project is a bit more involved, as you can imagine, than the RPD project. This does take place in and around areas that are currently occupied. The plan for construction of this is a multi-stage plan starting on the western edge or end of the project. So phase one will be doing the university section between Broad or west of Broad, I should say. Lafayette is going to be closed at that point. That's already slated to be closed as part of the Bassick High School project. So the first one there will close Lafayette. We will elevate University Avenue with the earthen berm we described, drive the sheeting to the Broad Street, and that's phase one. Next. So in phase two, Broad Street is done and stabilized. I'm sorry, University is done and stabilized, and we're starting to work on Broad Street. So we're going to elevate Broad Street and University from head of park across the head of park between Broad and Main during this phase, and we will start work in Seaside Park. Traffic during this phase is diverted to Main Street. We finish Broad Street. University is still closed, but Broad Street's open. Some of University is paved, and now we shut Main Street down and build the Pocket Park and Main Street South. And at that point, we complete the work in Seaside Park. We have to span both measures or both stages for the work in Seaside Park because of the elevation changes. To match the grade, the proposed grade, we need to be working on that road to make the park complete. So at that point, during this phase, we're completing the park, we're completing the stormwater channel in the park, and we're installing the culverts, not shown on this drawing, down to the south of this. Once these phases are complete, we then proceed eastward across 60 Main, and then proceed to construct the concrete eye wall in the north-south alignment up to the rail yard, completing the 4 major phases that we see. Pump station probably starts somewhere in the 3rd phase, and has to be online in time for us to activate the system with the completion of the 4th phase. So schedule for this, again, like the RBD, we submitted the 90s in January. Permits are undergoing or are in process right now. We again are anticipating final design sometime this summer. Permits are a little bit more involved in this, so we're thinking winter 2022, late fall, winter 2022. Again, put it out to bid and start construction with a 2-year construction period for this project, so completion in 2024. Next. This is information to reach out to us and to stay up to breast with what we're doing with our updates to Resilient Bridgeport. And at that point, we're opening for questions.
Thank you, Rich. All right, I agree. This is that portion of the program where the members of the panel will all join us on camera so we can answer your questions. Again, please type your questions in the Q&A section below or raise your virtual hand and we will unmute you and you can ask your questions aloud. Again, please bear in mind, we can and will field questions for the 90% design plans. I want to restate that Resilient Bridgeport is a federally funded environmental justice project that aims to improve the quality of life and property on the South End by reducing flooding for current properties and making way for development of underdeveloped and stressed properties in addition to commerce to that area. This ultimately will provide better housing and economic development for the South End of Bridgeport. So with that being said, let's go to the questions. Let's see. I see both, and I'm going to turn it over to Delia because, yeah. I think it's better for her to navigate, and we'll just answer questions. We'll punt it to whom area of expertise it best fits.
So I'll start with a few from the Q&A box, and then I'll move to the raised hands.
Okay.
Because some of these came in earlier. Are the renderings of how the structures the engineers are placing in the city, is that how they'll look when final design?
Yes. Yeah, no, they're accurate renderings for what we're designing.
Oh, great. Will the outfall from the pump station to Cedar Creek need to be upgraded or changed in any way where this crosses private property?
There will be a connection on private property. So basically that is a manhole. And we'll get the necessary rights for it, but it is a manhole on top of the current line. It's called the doghouse. And then we'll cut the line open. The existing line is adequate to handle our flow.
Great. Instead of Linden Tree Alley, and maybe I mispronounced that, would it be possible to plant swamp oaks? Linden trees are not salt tolerant. Has that been considered?
Yes, I'm going to field that question. That's a great
Please
question.
do.
We are planting swamp white oaks throughout the site, and a number of other oaks that we've been advised will do well on the site from our arborist. There is an existing linden alley that's on the property on the park site where we're meeting existing. And that's where we would potentially add 1 or 2 lindens to continue that alley from the west side of Seaside into the head of park area. but we're for the most part not planting lindens.
Thank you. And this is just a comment. It looks like you found a good home for the horse statue trough. Thank you. So wanted to share. A question. I got a little confused. Will Broad Street continue to Iranistan? It seems like it will not. Can someone please clarify?
So Broad Street runs north-south as does Iranistan. Johnson Street Extension will continue through to Iranistan on the RBD project.
Dr.
So,
Frank, maybe you might want to restate your
yeah.
question, only because those streets are parallel, so they don't run into each other. So we'll give you an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, and welcome to raise the hand. I'm going to do one more from the Q&A and then go to the hands raised. So you can always clarify then. To whom was the 90% plan submitted, and where can the public access it in its entirety?
It will be posted on our website. It was important that we present it to the public tonight with Q&A, and we also afterwards will post it on the website, so it will be accessible.
Great. So now I'll go to some hands raised. I'll say the name and then allow you to unmute yourself, so you'll be able to ask your question aloud to the panel. Brandon Newton, you will be allowed to speak now if you have a question.
They have to unmute.
Yes. Yeah. Please unmute yourself if you still have a question. Your hand is raised. It's on the microphone mute button on the control panel you should have. All right. We'll move on. We will come back in case I will lower your hand, but if you have a question in the future, we'll come back. Gregory Breland.
Yes, thank you. Just some clarifications. The money runs out in September of 23, but the FRRP is scheduled to be completed in the winter of 24. How does that work?
The HUD funding has to be expended by that date. And that, for those of you that are following what's going on in DC, that timeline may have changed with the omnibus bill. Actually, it will have changed. We just haven't officially gotten that notification as yet. But to answer your question, it's the HUD funding that had that deadline, not the FEMA funding and not the U.S. Fish and Wildlife funding.
Okay. My understanding is that Broad Street is going to go up and over the berm, but you showed a picture of a stop log gate at Broad Street. Are we going to have a gate and a slope up and a slope down at Broad Street?
So there is a small gate plan for Broad Street to allow sea level, to account for sea level rise. It's not necessary right now, and we don't want to raise it that high right now, but a small gate will be installed on Broad Street during flood events.
I see. Okay, one more.
And that's in the neighborhood of like 2 feet, so it is a very small gate.
I understand there's going to be a cul-de-sac at Lafayette. Is there going to be a cul-de-sac at Main Street where you're putting in that pocket park?
Main Street will turn onto Henry. So it'll be a no through, but it'll go to Henry. You can get out that you can get out that way. There's 3 structures that we're working with the 3 owners south of it to allow their cars in and out. But traffic will be diverted to Main Street. Or I'm sorry, to Henry.
Okay, I live down here near where the new Bassick High School is going on. They've torn down the buildings. Are you confident you can coordinate your activity with their activity? I mean, they've got some big equipment out there.
Yeah, they do. Yes, we are. We are continuing to coordinate with them throughout the design process. So yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we have a question from Mark Kurtzman. You can unmute.
Good evening. This is Mark Kurzman. I represent the owner of 60 Main Street. Mr. Pettinelli, you indicated in your presentation materials that the pump station is located on Henry Street. Just so I'm clear, sir, that pump station is actually proposed to be installed on the 60 Main Street property. Is that correct?
Yes, on the address would be on Henry. So that's what I meant.
The address will be on Henry, but the
Right.
actual construction
the
and
building
the
is
location.
on 60 Main. Yes.
Okay. And as I understand your presentation, sir, there's also going to be a sheet pile and earthen berm running the entire east-west access across 60 Main Street. Is that correct, sir?
That's correct.
So I guess my question to you, sir, is what analysis has been performed to determine how the construction of that pump station and the construction of the earthen and sheet pile berm is going to impact the city-approved development plan for 60 Main Street?
We worked closely with the owner on the plans we were provided, and our plan, our coastal flood defense system splits the two buildings between, I believe it was phase 1 and 1A, or but the plans had a road, an access road heading straight to the east from the intersection of University and Main, and we are running down that road. We did work with the plans as far as they were developed, and then extended out.
Mr. Pettinelli, do you know when the last time anybody associated with this project spoke to the owner of 60 Main Street about these development plans?
Rich, I don't think you can really speak to that. I will speak to that. And honestly, Attorney Kurzman, those are discussions that will continue with Department of Transportation, their right-of-way team.
Okay, so basically I should take this issue up with the Department of Transportation right-of-way team, Deputy Commissioner?
Yes.
Okay, can you identify for me who I should be speaking with over at the?
They actually will be in contact with you. There's just a couple of boxes we have to check with our council and theirs, and then they will be in contact with all of the property owners, in particular 60 Main.
Okay, because as you know, ma'am, I'm very, very anxious to speak to somebody about the impact of this project on 60 Main Street. So whatever you could do to facilitate that dialogue would be much appreciated.
Absolutely, and I agree.
Great, we'll take one more. We have one more hand raised, and then we'll go back to the Q&A box. So Dr. Frank LaGrotiere, sorry if I mispronounced that.
Not a problem. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I figured instead of chatting in the box, I'll ask my question. So Broad feeds into Waldameer, which ends up in Iranistan. So my question is, are we ending Broad? Are we going to continue? Is it going to continue to be a through street all the way around?
Yes, yeah. So the yellow that you saw that makes it look like I stopped is the extent of work I need to do. And from there on, it's going on.
Okay, so in a way, on the left side, as you're going down Broad, kind of across from where the dorms are coming down, that's your pocket park. Is that right?
No, down Broad, we down. Can we back up to that slide that shows the overall development? Up near the front where, you have the yellow of the roads and stuff, the first one on FRP. Oh, keep going forward. So right there, yep, that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, Broad Street in yellow is the extent of work I need to do. Beyond that, it stays in existing conditions. So we are coming down to, actually, we just hit the driveway of the clinic, and that's about it.
Okay. I
Seaside
think I
Park is
got
to
it.
the right.
Yep. Thank you for that.
Yep.
All right, we have a few more in the chat. Who will be responsible for placing and maintaining the gates after the project is complete?
We're actually still working on that. That is the O&M aspect of the project. So we're still in discussions about that.
And head of park tree inventory. I'm not sure if we have this info on hand, but how many chestnuts did you count? Will you be planting any new chestnuts?
I thought that was a joke. That's actually a question.
I will
Yes.
take that question.
Thank you, Louise.
Yeah.
Take it away, Louise.
So I don't know the answer. It is probably a low number. We do have a list of all of the trees that are, the sort of the top 10 trees that are on the at the park, that are currently growing at the park. And those are lindens, plane trees, white pine, red maple, Norway maple. There's a whole list of them, and horse chestnut is not on there. We don't currently have it in our plant list, but I think perhaps the red horse chestnut might actually work as we strive to look at diversity. So it'll be something that we'll consider.
And I will add that to our glossary next time, because I initially thought you meant actual chestnuts. And I'm thinking, we had an arborist out there, but we did not have that on the list, but you mean the chestnut trees. Okay, noted. Thank you. I feel much better.
Thank you. Do people need to evacuate in a flood even with gates?
So if you're behind the coastal flood defense system, no. The intent is to take this out of the floodplain.
Great. And a follow-up, and how will those berms and gates look in the landscape? I only saw details of the gates, not a rendering.
We're still evaluating what exactly the gate is going to have. Again, in terms of what we paint on it per se, or any signage we put on it. The vast majority of time, that gate is, if it's a roller gate, it is slid over and masked with landscaping and such. So you won't really see it. When it's out, we will have some type of attraction on it. The slot gates you don't see, you will only see the receptacles on either end. And those again will be treated to match the urban design of the area.
Thank you. How does this project interface with building BASIC? Will BASIC be constructed before or after?
We are still evaluating construction schedules with BASIC and permit schedules. So what I can say is it will be closely coordinated. We have done this. It is not uncommon to work on significant projects in close proximity, in this case on top, next to each other. But I don't know exactly what their schedule is yet. So we are coordinating on that.
Great. So is there a road on top of the Resilience Pocket Park feature where Main is dead-ended, running east across Broad and Main to 60 Main?
A road across.
Is there a road on top of the Resilience Pocket Park feature?
Oh,
where
yes.
Main is dead-ended?
Yes, University will continue to Main. The Pocket Park connects to the northern end of Main Street South, that we call it. So when you get to the top of the Pocket Park, there will be a road there. We might extend a little bit past it, but there will be a road there that then turns south. And that road could be extended into 60 Main.
Thank you. Another question, Louise, I think this is for you. Are beech trees also being considered?
We're not, that's a good question. We're not considering beech trees right now. They have a really shallow root system and they're only mildly salt tolerant. They also are, there's a new beech disease that's coming out, if you really want to get into the weeds here, which is called beech leaf disease. That's new and no one really understands what it's doing or how it's doing it, but it's defoliating the trees. So I think we'll stay away from beech.
Great, thank you. And is one able to get a copy of the tree inventory for the whole park?
If I'm not mistaken, it's on the website already, and if it's not, it will be within the next 24 hours.
It is up. It was put
Thank
up
you.
today, yes.
All right.
And we do have a hand raised, so I'd like to go to that. Brandon, if you'd like to unmute, you can ask your question. Brandon Newton, you should be able to unmute now if you'd like to ask a question out loud.
If he's having trouble, perhaps he could type it.
That's, yes, absolutely. We do have one more comment while we wait to see if he's able to unmute. Someone left a comment, not a question. I don't have any questions, but just want to say thank you for a great panel and for your gracious response to the questions coming in.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Perhaps we lost Brandon.
Not sure. And at this point, we don't have any other questions in the Q&A box or any other hands raised. Oh, here we go. We have another question. You said these berms would be put out of, excuse me, let me reread this. You said these berms would put us out of the floodplains. Would this help Seaside Village?
So we are not impacting the flood conditions at Seaside Village. We are providing dry egress with the RBD project, and our pump station is designed to accommodate some of the separation that the city of Bridgeport is planning for Seaside Village. So yeah, that's more a egress plan.
Great. Thank you. We don't have any more questions at this time. When might separation begin?
We're not involved with the separation of Seaside. That's a question for WPCA. We just accommodate they gave us a request for design points, and we were able to incorporate those.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Appreciate you spending the last hour and nearly 20 minutes with us. Give it a couple of seconds. I know there's a bit of a delay when you type your questions, but we appreciate your questions and your feedback this evening. Looking forward to coming back with our final design. All right. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And thank you to our panel.
Thanks to everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks all.
Good night.
Good night.